welcome everybody. Thank you for coming online and see this conversation of myself and Marloes. So my name is Philip Heetbrink. I'm the CEO of Scilife. With me today, I have Marloes Seesing. Marloes, maybe you can introduce yourself briefly.
Hi everyone, I'm Marloes Seesing. I'm based in the Netherlands, Amsterdam. Background is my living room, as most of you are probably in. I'm the global head of the healthcare industry vertical at Yusen Logistics. Philip asked me to join this webinar and we came up with this topic together. So once talking about this topic, I would also give a little bit more information about my background, so that will come a little bit later in this webinar.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, the webinar is about the quality meeting the customer, right? As a backbone of business development. I think it's a very interesting topic. How is the webinar structured? It's really just two sections, so to speak. The quality meets customer from Yusen's approach, how Marloes implemented that at Yusen over the past few years, and have this conversation. I'm very curious to what Marloes is going to explain. Remember that you can ask questions or post questions. I'll be asking my questions also as much as possible, but then we will make sure that there's this section of Q&A at the end where we will go systematically through the questions that you posted in the Q&A button in the Zoom bar. Again, if we don't have time to go through all of them, we will make sure to reply to those questions over email later. All right, so with that, I think we can kick it off. So Marloes, customer-centric approach to quality, right? What does that mean for you, and how did you do that at Yusen?
So to explain a little bit more about that topic and why we picked this topic, we have to go back to a little bit of the beginning of my career. We'll not make it too long. We'll try to keep it a little bit brief. But I started after pharmacy school, so I'm a pharmacist. I joined Genzyme, a biotech company from out of the US, and I worked in the clinical supply department. And what I noticed here is that when releasing that clinical trial material, we really had to work with the quality department, and it felt really rigid. It felt we really need to make sure that all the patients got the supply in the right time. And it was also really medication for Genzyme for rare diseases. So they really need to get it the right time. But always it felt like that quality was a kind of a showstopper or a blocker. And I said, well, that needs to be different. So during that time, and of course, it was a very high quality company. And with the biotech and new medicines, you have to be really careful. But during that time, I thought that when I ever get a new role within quality, I'm going to do it differently. And I thought about it a lot when working for Genzyme. Well, Genzyme got acquired by Sanofi. Don't go into details for that one. But then I moved to a Dutch company in pharmaceutical compounding, and they were active in 30 countries, so really a global company. They wanted me to really reorganize their global quality department. And then I thought, okay, this is my chance to do it differently, because it was really kind of a sales company, very commercial company. And I wanted to be really compliant and to have a really good quality strategy, but I want us to add to the sales strategy. I want us to be very pragmatical. So what I did is really to make sure that my team of quality people, that their first priority was to be compliant, but also to really think into solutions. So if you say no, always come up, and I think there might be some people on the webinar that really recognize this because they've worked or are working in my team. I accept no, but I only accept no when you come up with 2 or 3 different solutions. How are you going to do it then? Just a no is just not acceptable for me. So I think that really worked well in that Dutch company with pharmaceutical compounding. And then I was recruited for the job within Yusen Logistics. So with Yusen Logistics, it was it's a logistic company, not a pharmaceutical company. So the way how you work with quality is a little bit different than in pharmaceutical companies. But they were really looking for a global healthcare quality director that would be part of the BD organization. Because they noticed the BD people, the business development people in the healthcare vertical, so that's on the left side of the slide, they were noticing that the gap of the quality strategy within Yusen was kind of prohibiting them to grow in their sales strategy, to grow their sales. So then I was asked to join that to really develop a global healthcare quality strategy that would help our BD people to sell that, to bring it across to our potential customers, to increase our sales. So what I did from that point of view is that I really was taking my experience in the pharmaceutical company that was at that time almost 11 years, and we're thinking about, okay, what do they really want? What are they expecting? What kind of quality level are they expecting? What kind of projects are they expecting? And based on that, really developed a quality strategy, which of course then, because it was kind of a really customer-centric approach, we would train the people on the left side of the slide, our BD people, so that they could bring it across to our potential customers. So you see that in each
before they were probably focusing mostly on the so to speak the features of the service. So how do you get our product from A to B? But they were not knowledgeable enough to talk about the quality part. Is that how you train them to do that differently?
So it was also more, there was a lack of strategy. So there was a lack of a quality product. So we first had to really build a quality product. And in the next slide, I will tell a little bit about what that contains. So there was the lack of a product. And that, of course, will also generates a lack of knowledge about that product because it's not really even existing. So kind of it was both ways.
So you had to reinvent the service that you were providing to your pharma customers then? Yeah.
So we needed to have a global strategy because there were a little bit of pockets of quality. We have to bring it to we have to harmonize it and also to really build a strategy to upgrade the quality level of our service.
Interesting.
So, and then after, I think 2.5 years, time is flying, especially during the pandemic, although we were not expecting this, but they asked me to be the global head of the healthcare vertical. So already when in my previous position of the global healthcare quality director, I was already cooperating with the BD department a lot, as I was explaining, to train them, we also really joined customer visits. But now as a head of the healthcare vertical, I have even kind of more influence how the two teams are working together. And also because our business units like air, ocean, contract logistics, the warehousing, we are building healthcare products with them, also with quality, our quality strategy as the backbone of those products. So now I'm kind of, based on that, really use quality strategy that we have been building as a fundament of our PD approach.
Okay, and so how much during the sales cycle are BD people able to manage the whole sales cycle without the help of quality, or maybe also the other way around? How much time is there still quality people involved in the sales cycle?
So what we try to do is, because I really want quality to be involved in the sales process, because I think they are the knowledgeable people to really explain in detail about all the projects. But of course, it's impossible to do because the business development people, they need to first hunt for customer, have kickoff meetings, introduction meetings. I don't think it's of a lot of use to have quality involved in here. That's why we want to train all our salespeople that are involved in healthcare through our regional healthcare BD managers to be knowledgeable enough about all of this to kind of do the first couple of meetings. And once it gets more serious and we see more and more that also from the customer side, more quality people are joining those meetings. So from the moment on that quality people from the customer sides are joining, we also try to make sure that quality people from our side are joining. So
Got it.
during kind of the second meeting during a tender, or there are several kind of meetings where we see, okay, if there's somebody from quality joining, we will make sure that somebody is joining as well from our part.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So the other thing that I was thinking about when you were explaining how you started doing this effort within Yusen, you have this business development team, right? On the one hand, and then you have this whole quality setup with the whole team on the right hand side. And then at some point, there's this quality person that goes to the business development side, and that is going to, somehow impose that we need to redefine our services. Our quality needs to be the backbone. But they are salespeople. They might say, we know what the customer wants. We know what to sell. We know how to sell it. Why is this quality person coming in and telling us what we should do and how, right? So what was the acceptance of the business development team to have this quality person lead them at some point?
I think there are several aspects in this. And I think, first of all, myself and the team that I built in a couple of years, a couple of people are coming from the pharmaceutical industry. So although most of the business development people talked a lot with them, I've been really working for two pharmaceutical companies in different sections. So we could bring that knowledge to Yusen and base our strategy on that. Second thing is that it was the BD team that asked for a quality strategy because they acknowledged how important this was for their sales strategy. So imposing quality as a backbone was kind of something that they have been asking for. And I think the third one is that in the beginning also joined a lot of customer meetings, and they could already see how I was also engaging with the customers, potential customers. So that I that were almost them, my previous colleagues. So they saw me engaging with them, and they saw that that was kind of also really helping their process. And then maybe the fourth thing, and it's a little bit strange to tell that about yourself, but I've been a manager of a team, I think already for 10 or 12 years now. So I've been managing people, and I'm quite a people person. So I think me being there also direct manager and their people manager, that nobody mentioned to me anything about that they had a hard time with that. So I think the acceptance was really there. So, and everybody took it in.
Yeah, and it's what you mentioned, right? Somehow they must have noticed during their sales pitches, trying to sell a service that was quality related, they would get a lot of questions that they might not know how to answer them appropriately. So having support from quality probably made a lot of sense to them, right? To incorporate that.
Yeah, and also I think the cooperation between the two teams, and now on this slide they're really seen as separate teams, and of course they have had separate tasks, but because we really select or train our people from quality to be really pragmatical and to really think about what the customer wants, and we train our BD people really on our quality strategy, you really also bring them much closer together. Because we are just one department. So that's and that's maybe a separate thing from pharmaceutical companies, and there it's a little bit harder to change, but especially from other companies like LSPs, I would definitely advise to not really set quality as a totally separate. We need to be independent, and we need to have an escalation line where we can say this, now we need to do something, but we need to be very much in cooperation with all the different departments. Because what I've seen go, maybe wrong with my previous career, is that sometimes quality was involved at last, and they then had to say, well, this is not possible, and they were always the deal breaker. So they need to be really part of the organization
from the start, to identify where might be the gaps and not promise stuff
And then you
for the
also
person.
allow them, well, it's not a different species, yeah, them, but to come up with solutions during the process. So I think that's a very important part.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The only thing is that of course business development and quality management might be tracking very different KPIs, right? Business development is all about deals. Quality is more about quality events and all that. So yeah, you try to bring them closer together, but you still have your separate teams, right?
Exactly. And what we see, so for the KPIs, internal KPIs to say so, you definitely use different KPIs. Well, because I'm leading the quality and the BD department, for me, they are combined. But we see the more the quality is reaching their KPIs, the more BD is supported to be able to reach their KPIs. That's kind of how it works.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Shall we go to the next slide? Marloes,
yes, let's do that. So talked a little bit about coming from a pharmaceutical company and take that knowledge to really develop a global healthcare quality strategy, which was not really in place before that. And what we are thinking about is like what, and this is mainly, this is really focused on an LSP, which Yusen is, a logistics service provider. What do they really want? They want a fully compliant service, because if we're not compliant, there are many non-conformities and issues ongoing, which takes a lot of time and might, at the end, even lead to rejection of the product. That last one is, of course, something that we really want to prevent. So starting with a blank sheet, I said, okay, first, we need to really create a GDP standard, which is acceptable for all customers globally. So the EU GDP is really acceptable by all countries of this world. There are some countries that have, like China, some separate requirements. We took the EU GDP standard because most of the customers accept this globally. And that we really created a standard for all of our business units: air, oceans, warehousing, land transport. And then we said, okay, but now we have to really extend our GDP network, because customers want to fly their products all over the world, and they want the same quality management system, the same level of quality all around the world, because it's still the same product. And they also, many of the big customers, they have the headquarters in Europe or in the US, and they want that high standard globally. So what we need to really make sure is that also internally, we really did GDP setup so that our facilities and our way of working was EU GDP compliant. But as you can imagine, we outsource a lot. So we outsource a lot to third parties. Think about airlines, ocean carriers. We don't have our own vessels or airplanes. So we put a lot of focus on third-party management to make sure that all our third parties that we use for healthcare are following all the processes that we follow as well, that we have the same quality level. Yep. And then still, what customers are expecting from us as well is that we think about the lane before we start doing their shipments. So a route risk assessment is more and more required. That is bringing everything we know and to predict the risk. And also from our side to then eliminate this risk before starting the shipments. That can be done by changing the route, using different carriers, but also we created a packaging project, because there are a lot of, and I'm not going into this too much, because there's a lot of types of active, passive packaging that you can add to the shipments so that you can eliminate risk. Mm-hmm. And a last part of the strategy, well, at least of the steps, is really start working with smart data loggers and link that to our 4PL system that's called Vantage, so that our customers could see have traceability of the location and the temperature during that all those steps during the entire lane, and all the processes that we use for these steps, and to really try to get an end-to-end compliant, GDP compliant lane for our customers. All those processes are kept in our EQMs, because we went in this process we also went from a paper QMS, which were different in all kind of locations, to the EQMS, for which we selected Scilife. And besides the processes, also because so just also mentioned is we are not perfect yet, and although we try to eliminate most of the risk before we start shipments, there will be some non-conformities, if it's by a third party, by ourselves, by even sometimes with the customers. So we also track them globally in our EQMS, and based on that, from a global point of view, we can track and do some trend analysis on what's happening. And of course, we will always do preventive action. And based on this, we constantly do continuous improvement until at some point we are perfect. So going to a zero tolerance at some point.
Yeah. So this makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's in the end, it's like a continuous improvement cycle where you can verify and check at certain points how you can avoid problems, continuously improve the process with these checks in place through corrective and preventive actions, etc., etc. So this is all very, very quality related. So can you explain maybe how this ties into your business development strategy? So how do you use this?
So if you look at what the customer really wants, so when you start talking to the customers, they ask for which our facilities are GDP compliant. How do you eliminate the risk? So, for example, when a tender comes in from a customers, you first get a request for information. Yep. There are a number of questions related to quality, which need to be answered by us, and it needs to be satisfactory to the customers. Mm-hmm. So this is really as a fundament for our salespeople to say, hey, the quality we have in control, we have a process, we are implementing this globally. So for all your shipments, this will be happening. And of course, there are another aspect like pricing, the relationship, the customer service part. But this is for the pharmaceutical customers, the quality part and the quality strategy and the team behind it is a really important topic to have that in place before they even want to continue their conversation.
So yeah, that the question that comes to mind is how if some company wants to implement it in a similar way, how would they go about doing that, right? So you're mentioning it a little bit. It's really putting in place first your whole quality system in a very logical way with a continuous improvement cycle, and then using that to sell your service, or could you say, of course, this is a 7-step process for the continuous improvement part, but can you maybe explain the few steps that are required if somebody on the call says, this is very interesting, I would like to implement this in our company, where do I start? So
depends a little bit what kind of company they are working for, because these are really steps that are applicable for an LSP, for a logistics service provider. And what I would say is that, and I don't think, but not to give tips to our competitors, but anyway, this is quite out in the open anyway. I think there should be, first of all, a separate quality department for healthcare only. You see in many companies, you have a compliance team. Think about ISO 9001. Yusen also kind of developed their own QMS that are going for all verticals. And with verticals, I mean also for retail, technology. So they kind of have one compliance quality strategy behind that. I think healthcare is so specific that you need, well, knowledgeable people. It sounds, because that will include myself. You need knowledgeable people to set this strategy. So you really need a separate team, I think, with healthcare specialists and with a quality background. And it doesn't mean that from there on, you can also use some parts of the strategy for other verticals. So I think you have to have the separate team, and it needs to be supported from GHQ, from the global headquarters, because this is a global strategy. In many of the companies, still the opcos, the different countries are quite powerful and have their own P&L. So, but if you're supported by GHQ and you have a good strategy, but still you need to convince your countries to really work with you. And there also you see a cooperation, which we didn't discuss yet before, between BD and quality, because sometimes, as you can see in step 2, where we want a certain opco/country to develop, for example, a GDP licensed warehouse, it will mean investment. They will say, okay, we know that quality is required. We know that this GDP license, but it's still X amount of money. Then we work together with the BD, healthcare BD team, to make a return of investment, and build a pipeline for this potential investment, to make sure that they can see, yeah, but within 3 years, it's very likely that you earn it all back and will really start making profit. So that's, again, the cooperation that's also really needed. So you need the knowledgeable people, you need a specific team, but you also really need support from the GHQ, because you need to convince all participants. And what they always say, quality is not just a department, everybody is responsible for quality.
Absolutely, yeah. Still, just to focus a little bit on the people part and the team part, considering the fact that business development is very quality oriented now, do you hire business developers, salespeople that have quality knowledge already, or you just hire salespeople and train them internally, or has that changed in any way since this was implemented at Yusen?
Well, I think that preferably, so when I started, some people were already assigned, especially from the BD side, and some were already working for healthcare. So there was some basic level of GDP knowledge, but not on the projects that we were going to start. For newly hired, because there always is kind of a changing of personnel, I always really like to see that they have been working in the healthcare sector, not don't per se in pharmaceutical companies, that would be really a pro, but that they, at least from an LSP point of view, have been working in the healthcare sector for a couple of years. So they know about GDP. If they think gross domestic product, then they might not go to the second round. So they really want to know what GDP is. I'm not expecting to have a quality background, because I think the sales part, but you also expect a little bit the hunting part of a salesperson to really go out for new customers. I think that's an aspect that in general, but now I'm going to put people in small boxes and bubbles. In general, the hunting part you don't really see with quality people. So you also really have to look into their, what are they really good at? So you want people that really want to hunt and go out there, but with the capability to take in the quality knowledge and really understand it, to bring it across to the customers. But as we previously discussed, only for the kind of the first phase, because then I also feel more confident to really get my quality people in.
Yeah, and you it's very hard to find both qualities in the same person, right? There can be exceptions, obviously, that's great, but yeah, you need a lot of
and it is also from the other side of the vertical, from the quality, because I'm very lucky with my quality team that they are very pragmatical, and I think a part of it you can really learn, but I think if you have worked for maybe 25 years, and I don't want to offend anyone here online, but if you maybe have been working on really as a QP for a biotech company for 25 years, and then you go into LSP, into an LSP and work for quality there, where you're expected to be really pragmatical and customer centric, that might be really hard as well. So it's always, I've hired quite some people now also into the quality team. That's always a big part of the interview. Can you be pragmatical? And if you say no, sometimes yes, can you also really be, because you have to think in solutions. Only a no is not sufficient. So that's also, so for both subdivisions, you really have to look into the people, the people as well.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, that's interesting. Thanks. I'm doing a quick check in the Q&A section. I see one question from Wojciech. I hope I pronounce your name correctly. Will a recording of the webinar be made available to participants? Yes. So all the registrants, so all the participants in the webinar will get an email afterwards where they can also click the link and see the recording of this webinar. So don't worry about that. I just wanted to answer this question because other people might also have this question in mind. Another thing that I would like to ask you, Marloes. So I've been also in our company. Sometimes we struggle with it a little bit, and you touched upon it a little bit. There are companies that have business development help with the implementation of the project once it's sold. So, for example, we don't do that. So we have a business development team, and then they close the deal, the contract is signed, and then it's really transitioned to a customer success team that does the whole implementation of Scilife in our case, right? And then after onboarding, it's the customer's transition to regular support, but it's all under the customer success team. With larger projects where you have very big services that are somehow spanning over different years with very specific requirements for a larger customer, what I found, if you talk to these kinds of companies that sell these services, the problem that they see is that if you have business development, close the deal and forget about it, and you have a different team to do the whole implementation of the project, you kind of have a disconnect between what the business development team promised and then what the implementation team must execute, and then you have this constant fight between the two departments, which has a negative impact on the customer. We've evaluated it ourselves, but Scilife is a quite standardized product, and we don't see the need. While I'm listening to what you are explaining, Fortune 500 type of customers, very large, multi-year logistics projects. Is business development in any way also responsible for the implementation, or is that completely separate, or how is Yusen doing that? So
it's a little bit of a gray area. It's quite difficult. There are rules, but is it fully put in practice? That's the question. So how we see it is that, of course, business development first task is to really develop new business, get in contact with new customers, but also grow within the business within the new customers. So what we say, okay, originally when you get in, so for example, I will just say an example, otherwise it gets too vague. You get in contact with a new customer, they are launching a global air freight tender. The BD person makes sure that we get invited with all the calls he had and with the visits pre-pandemic. And then you get invited. Then the business development person is still responsible for facilitating the tender, because if that tender is air freight, it needs to be managed by the tender team of the air freight department. But they need still to facilitate it. They need to send the submissions to the customer, because at that point, they are the only point of contact with the customer. If we win the business, at that point, the business unit should take over. But they should, and sometimes we are talking about really good relationships. So then sometimes it's difficult to let go of a certain project. But for pharma in general, if you never had business for a pharmaceutical company, you start relatively small. They will never say, Yusen who? Oh, but sounds good. We give you all our air freight. It will, they say, okay, they saw all the presentation. They saw our quality strategy. They were very impressed. And then they would say, I have 6 lanes that you can start with, for example. So then BD, because BD is also not only to get new customers, but also to grow with existing customers. So that means that they should not implement, but they should have an overview of how it's going. Because if those 6 lanes, if it's going horrible, and the BD person will ask, when do I get the other 6? He makes a fool out of himself, or she.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So And what we are also part of the Yusen strategy is the key account strategy. That's really selecting key accounts. Well, most of the LSP have this, and then grow them internally. So then we have a key account director that's also part of BD. So they need to make sure operation is going well to enable the growth of new business within the same cost.
So there's this constant channel of information flowing from the business unit that is doing the project back to the business development team to know, is this the right time to upsell, cross-sell, whatever. Or
escalate maybe even. And then quality in this process, quality is overarching.
Okay.
So I cannot put one line in that process from it stops and it it's taking over. There's a little bit of a blur.
And it's not that you have like a customer success team. You really have a business unit that does the implementation of the project.
And within
business development that basically keeps in contact with the customer at all times and is responsible for upsell. Correct?
And what we're developing is that customer success, well, we call it a little bit different, but department within a business unit, and that division of that business unit is then in closest contact with the vertical / with the BD team.
Got it. Okay. Anything else you want to add to this slide, Marloes?
No, I think because if I'm getting more detailed, then maybe people get bored. And we really go into detail. So, no, I think the highlights I really shared here.
Okay, I'm going to double check. All right. Okay. There are some questions already in the Q&A, but let's finish the presentation first because maybe they are automatically answered, and then
just a slide. Sorry, I'm.
No, go ahead.
You, Philip. Just a slide that is also showing our customer-centric approach, because innovation and digitalization and sustainability, but kind of now I'm doing it, didn't want to mention sustainability because that's not a part of the discussion today. We can discuss that for another 20 hours, but that's not a really a core topic for quality, although we need to be part of this again. But innovation and digitalization, well, often go hand in hand, is really a request from our customers as well. It's still unbelievable that with pharma companies, and it's also partly our fault, but also the companies play a role, that they develop like gen-based products, but that still we work orders in paper, we do root risk assessments on Excel. Excel is still kind of a huge tool within the logistic business. And also we thought, if this is such an important topic, but also to be more professional and to work more efficiently, we really need to implement innovation in our strategy as well. So to start with, I will be very brief. With the root risk assessment, as mentioned, we did it on huge Excel sheets. But we now already work for a couple of years also to develop, but now also to really implement for customers with Validate. That's a web-based platform that's combining all data sources to calculate the risk per lane. And based on that, we can really implement solutions, for example, with our packaging project. And we're now even going to upgrade it with all the data we have regarding our packaging to maybe even implement that in Validate. So that's, for us, way more efficient, but it will also give a much better result for our customer.
Just a fun fact, Marloes, I found it funny when I received your draft presentation. And so Validate, it sounded very familiar, and Validate is actually a customer of Scilife too. So just I
think we started to work together at the same time with both companies. So so what we are also what's already mentioning with the data loggers, where it first we work with data loggers that you put in your USB, and you can only get the data of your temperature after the shipment. So only then you could see if you have to take some measurements. Now more and more we really want to implement, and of course that's in cooperation with our customer, smart data loggers, so you can follow temperature and location live, well, almost live, sometimes on an ocean, you don't always get that data. But we really want to combine it with our 4PL system so that you only have to go into one system to see all different kind of data and to really follow your shipment. The question is the customer really doing that, or kind of they want us to do it? And if we see something strange, like delay or different route or temperature excursion, we can already start working on this and trying to find solutions. And last but not least, we decided to go from a paper QMS to an EQMS, Scilife, as mentioned before. And that is also really because we wanted, my task was also to really become global within quality. And because we have so many different countries and so many different countries joining our GDP network, we need to have an overview, and we really need to work more consistently and really on one system, because you can imagine if you have 40 countries that all have their different SharePoints, there's no overview. No, so we want to be way more efficient, but also way more professional to our customers. And from our own point of view, we need to have visibility of what's happening with all the processes, all the actual QMS, but also with all the events. And we want all the people to really work into one system. And also, because we're working in one system, we have one consistent way and a way better way to report into our customer.
Yeah, so this whole digitalization was instrumental to get everybody on one page and yeah, instill this quality mindset and integrate it into business development somehow, right?
Yeah, and it went from both ways. It was kind of, was it imposed by the customer? Well, I think we were already working on this digitalization steps already from our own will, from our own desire to get more efficient and to get more global. But I think the imposing of the customer to not wanting to send manual orders or a manual route assessment anymore kind of speed up the process as well.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, anything else to add to this slide?
No, I think, and of course, this is an ongoing process, and this will never stop. And we always will make improvements, also obviously, sometimes together with. But that's I think we already made a huge step in the last 4 years.
Yep. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. So just to and I won't go over it point by point. But also to really have, once we decided, and that really is also based on coming from pharmaceutical companies, an EQMS was kind of a key. And I was already used to have what kind of benefits that will bring. I've always worked for global companies, and having separate paper QMSs in separate locations, you can never have the overview, and a lot of emails and phone calls will be involved. And it's just not kind of, if you have paper QMS, you almost can say it's almost not GDP compliant anymore. So this was one of the first things I put on the budget. And of course it's not when you put it on the budget that it's there the day after. But what we already seen that because our GDP network is growing, and all countries that are part of our GDP network need to be on the system, on the EQMS, on Scilife. So that's an ongoing process. But what we really see is that we have way better visibility of everything what happens, also on the events. So we can also follow up if they are closed or not, and specifically from a global point of view, for the global key accounts and the important accounts, we can really follow that closely. And for us, it's kind of the only tool we can use to really standardize our QMS. So still, we will never have, in each facility, we will never have the exact same QMS, because the activities, what are they doing different? Sometimes local legislation is a little bit different, but the structure and the high level, we want to have it standardized. And that also that everybody is communicating within the system. You can imagine that if you have a paper form that they start the complaint, the non-conformity is received in the UK. There's a paper form, well, a Word document, they will complete a bit, they will send it to China. China will do a little bit version control. You don't have a clue. Are we working with the same version? And each opco is using a different kind of form. So this will
chaos.
Yeah, it's a chaos indeed. So this, especially when we want to be more standardized and we want to be really have a global strategy, it was kind of a must-have for us.
It almost sounds like impossible that this was managed without it in the past, right?
Well, yeah, before that, it were kind of more a little bit of islands, and that was like 4.5 years ago. So really, the Benelux was working with Benelux, UK was working with themselves, and they just managed it from out of there. But my target was also to make things global, and to make things global without such a system. And even now, with not able to travel, even to really dive into their paper QMS, that would even make it even more impossible.
And then did you really transition from paper to this EQMS, or were you already have digital or hybrid with Word and PDF documents? How was that transition?
So we did have in some opcos had a custom made in-house made quality management system that was not validated. And that was not really working well. It was also a little bit out of date. So you can imagine when you have an audit from a big customer, a pharmaceutical customer with very high quality standards, and you have an audit, and of course the tour, etc. But the document part, they want to show you on the big screen your system where you pull everything out, and then already when you start with such a non-validated in-house created, because that's not our core business system, where they can already see, hey, that's out of date, that's not working. Then before you even show the document, they already have 5 findings on their noted on their paper. So what we see now is to really, not using the customer name, but anyway, we had a really important customer and project. We got it assigned like 2 weeks ago. And we had a 2 days workshop, and a part of it was, they went a little bit deeper than we expected, because we thought it was high level, what are we going to do? But they really did kind of a deep dive in our documents, and we really, now that same quality managers that was working with our local quality managers within Europe, that was working with that old system, and he just pulled everything out, could show how things were linked and which one, and they were really impressed. So that was really good to see.
Yeah, so you're really using the EQMS itself, so Scilife in this case, for the during audits to on screen show the auditor directly the data in your EQMS, as opposed to what was happening before. Auditor would request something, you would just go get that record, get that paper, get whatever file, and only present that. You feel comfortable just opening the EQMS and navigating through all your quality data within the system. That's it, right?
Yeah, to be honest, I would not feel comfortable because I'm not working with it that much. So no, but definitely the quality manager of a specific site, and also Astrid, she's now heading up our healthcare quality global team. They feel fully comfortable about that, pulling and explaining and explaining how things are linked.
No, with comfortable, I mean not because of how you know the system, but we have customers, for example, that say that come from paper, and that when we explain them that there is this read-only user, that you could even give an auditor read-only user, explain a few things, and they can find a way through the system. They literally tell us, "Are you crazy? We're not going to give access to all our quality data to some auditor. We're going to show them only what they want, what they are asking, so they don't find any gaps if they don't have to, right? So what we've seen more and more is that customers feel perfectly comfortable to show the data directly within the EQMS, because everything is linked, everything is in check, everything is compliant, and then you can see again audits as a tool to somebody else come in and find some gaps, which are just opportunities for improvement again, right? That's how I see our audits, our customer audits. It's not, I'm going to hide as much as possible and only show them the documents that they're asking so that they don't find anything. It's really like, oh, okay, you want to do an audit, great, we think we're doing great, but if you find some gaps, great. So we don't have to find them ourselves. So here, let me show you, right? And go into the EQMS, navigate everything that they want to see, and see what their report is like. So
yes, yeah. So I would not. I still would like us to be in control, navigating through it.
yeah, for sure. But you don't share a screen.
Because some documents need some explanation, and to see how we approached certain activities like temperature mapping, and but definitely I can say we feel totally comfortable to put it on a huge screen in front of all participants from the customers and go through the system to see. And before that, that was definitely not the case.
Okay. So I'm aware that we only have 6 minutes left. I want to be respectful of people's time. So let's dive into Q&A. I have some Q&A items in here. So again, for everybody in the call, just click on the Q&A button of your Zoom bar and post questions in there. The first one that I see is, are you using it? Are you using, I guess they mean the EQMS only for healthcare and pharma, or also in other verticals?
This kind of brings me back to one of the first comments I made in this hour, is that I think that for the healthcare vertical, we need a specific healthcare quality department, but that whatever goods comes out of this might be used for other verticals, because the level of quality in general has some airspace. They also have some high quality requirements, but in general are quite much higher than for other cargo, other products. But so I always thought that we might initiate some projects, but what we have been saying, and for some countries, we are also telling them, well, the other QMS, we really would like for ISO 9001 that you would also put it in there, because a lot of is overarching is well, maybe 80% of the documentation is quite similar. So, and then they have the same way of working. So although I'm only responsible for the healthcare, I do definitely try to convince OpCos to use it for their entire QMS, because it makes it way more efficient. But it's a little bit, people are sometimes a little bit scared of change. So for healthcare, then they get it. And for healthcare, we are pushing a lot. So then they do it. And so it can be also a phased approach. Some people do it all at once. Some they first start with their GDP and then with the ISO, for example. So it's definitely what I would advise to do so. Same maybe even for validated for the root risk assessment for some other products. But I would say I would advise it, but they're not always open for it because it's a big change. So first try healthcare and then they can move on further.
Okay, that makes sense. I hope that answers the question, Max. I have another question from Leonardo. What is your advice to have in mind before starting a risk assessment of the QMS? What is your advice to have in mind? So what should you keep in mind so before starting a risk assessment of your quality management system? Leonardo, I'm not 100% sure I understand the question. Do you understand, Marloes?
Do we think about root risk assessment? Do we talk about a full risk assessment of your GDP procedures, which we do yearly per facility?
Mm-hmm. So while we go to another question, Leonardo, maybe you can be a bit more specific, and we can come back to your question. All right, or put it in the chat. I'll check both in the Q&A or in the check in the chat. Okay, we have some time left, I hope. Yeah, a few minutes. Yeah, so okay, Leonardo says route assessment.
So but I have 2 minutes, so I don't want to go too detailed again, but that's what we have based on. And when you ask Astrid, who's now leading a global healthcare quality department, it will be a way longer answer. She is way more into this in detail. So where we base the route risk assessment off, you really start from the beginning. Of course, you look at the lane. You think you have already a carrier in mind, so you need to know all the quality data, in the questionnaire of the ground handlers, the airline, if it's an air freight, also maybe hubs for Yusen where the cargo hits, but also there's data, historical temperature data, historical delay data. Do we have security data per country? And that route risk assessment all brings it in together and calculates. Don't ask me how, because there's a white paper developed for this. Calculate what is the risk based on temperature excursions and where in the lane. What is the risk for damage? What is the risk for delay? What is the risk in quality overall? And based on that knowledge, you think, well, this is not acceptable together with the customer. So we have to do something about this to make it more acceptable before we even start, so that we limited the risk. So there are a lot of parameters to think of before starting this route risk assessment. And with the innovation part, we don't have to think that lot anymore, and the system will think for us if we put in the right data.
Yeah, exactly. We have 1 minute left. Let's squeeze one last one in from John. How long did it take for you to, Leonardo says, thank you so much. You're welcome, Leonardo. John says, how much did it take to do the transition from paper to EQMS?
For a specific opco, for overall, I've mentioned already that our GDP network is growing constantly. As it per opco, per facility, and they need to join. Sorry, sometimes I want to say Aqua. We gave it an internal name. They want to join Scilife. So that's why the implementation process internally within Yusen is a constant process. It also depends a little bit, if we look at per opco, how many documents do they have and how many people are part of this. For example, the Benelux we started with, and I don't have a clue anymore how many people, but we talk about a couple of hundred people that need to join this system, and that they need to start working with the system, and a couple of 20 or 40 more intensively, and a lot of documents. So you need to transfer those documents, you need to set up the training module. That's a bigger project than when you do a GDP setup of a very small country where they don't have a QMS yet, and then you build a GDP QMS in the system from start on. You don't have to do a transfer. And then there are 5 people involved. So then it's a way easier process. And besides that, Philippe, I think, but you can maybe tell a little bit more about that. When we started to be in contact in 2018, we also did quite some developments on the system to really make it more suitable for really global implementation.
Yeah, definitely. So Scilife was relatively young at that time, and with Yusen we did this co-development project in which some modules were fine-tuned, some features were added to be able to have this global solution over different sites over the whole world in one environment, and not have separate ones. So without the issue that with permissions and people would only see the right data, but then the people that should see all the data over the whole system can actually do so to figure out trends over these quality events in the whole world. So yeah, that was absolutely a very interesting project that we did 2 years ago. And yeah, Yusen seems to be growing and expanding the usage of the system every year. So that's good. I think we really have to wrap up. We're a few minutes over time. I would like to thank everybody for being here. I would like to thank Marloes for joining this and having this very interesting presentation and conversation. And with that, yeah, see you in maybe in the next webinar or otherwise.
Oh, more than welcome, Philip.